Okay, I got kicked off here after a half hour's worth of recording, so I'm back now. I'm going to step back a sentence or two. Top of the page, 151. Army after army was assembled under such men as Simon of Montfort and St. Louis. We do not intend to darken our page with a recital of the horrors of this war. We search in vain for anything equal to them, even in the worst atrocities of savage tribes, when engaged in their most sanguinary conflicts. Were a faithful account of all these enormities. Were a faithful account of all these enormities to be given, the recital would fill many volumes and would shock and outrage every feeling of our nature. Though legions of fiends had become incarnate and been let loose to ravage the earth, they could not have devised more exquisite torments. They could not have inflicted more ruthless slaughters and massacres, nor could they have stood by and witnessed the agony of their victims with a more hellish delight. The peaceful and fertile valleys of the Vaudois and the Waldenses were invaded and speedily devastated with fire and sword. Their towns and villages were burnt, while not one individual, in many cases, escaped to carry the tidings to the next valley. The young and the gray-haired, the most helpless, and the most unoffending were involved in the same indiscriminate slaughter. Mothers with their infants were thrown from the rocks, bonfires were kindled, and human beings by hundreds were piled upon them. Pits were dug, and vast numbers were buried alive. Gee, does that sound like a Inquisition or a what? What's the term that they used in World War II? For goodness sakes, a Holocaust. In short, every cruelty, barbarity, and indecency which rage, lust, and bigotry could invent and perpetrate were inflicted on these confessors of Christ. To accomplish what the Crusades, though carried on with indescribable fury, failed to effect, it was at last resolved that the holy office of the Inquisition should be erected. The horrors of this terrible court far exceeded those even of the Crusades. The Crusades did their work quickly. They swept across the scene of their visitation like a tempest, converting in a few days, sometimes in a few hours, busy and populous seats into profound solitudes. Such a proceeding was merciful compared to the lingering and excruciating torments to which the victim was doomed in the dungeons of the quote-unquote holy office, I might say. The ravages of the Crusades were acted in the face of day. The smoke of burning cities and human hecatombs rose into the air, polluting the firmament with a dismal cloud. The shrieks of the mother as her agony she collapsed her babe. The shrieks of the mother as in her agony she clasped her babe, when both were about to be precipitated headlong from the top of some precipice, were repeated again and again from the rocks adown which they were thrown. Quote, their moans, the vals, redoubled to the hills, and they to heaven, unquote. Accordingly, history has recorded part, at least, of these horrible tragedies, that we may admire the grace of God as shown in the constancy, and courage of the noble confessors that endured them, and know at what an expense of suffering and blood the truth has been handed down to us. But it is not so as regards the Inquisition. History has been forbidden to descend with her torch into the dungeons of the Holy Office. The crimes that have been there enacted and the sufferings that have been there endured remain untold. The familiars and the racks of the Inquisition piled their dreadful work in darkness. No eye saw the writherings of their victim. No ear heard his groans. And the much that these dungeons conceal shall remain concealed forever, till the dread judgment day. This terrible court ramified into every country where there were professors of the truth in Piedmont, France, Spain, Bohemia, Germany, Poland, Flanders, England, and endeavored by the most horrible means to exterminate what is termed heresy and heretics, to wear out the saints of the Most High. Thus were the words fulfilled, quote, when they shall have completed their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war with them, unquote. The history of the world is little else than a series of wars. Many of these are sufficiently melancholy and revolting. But in no age of time and in no country of the globe has there been seen a war of so cruel, ferocious, and bloodthirsty a character as that which the beast carried on against the witnesses. Having partaken of her vine and being friendized and maddened therewith, princes at the instigation of Rome have wasted the blood and the treasure of their subjects and literally beggared themselves to carry on this war. Philip II of Spain, when on his deathbed, acknowledged to the prince, his son, that he had spent on the civil wars of France, those of the Low Countries, and in other enterprises of the same nature, more than 594 millions of ducats, a sum altogether inconceivable. How many millions of lives, as well as of treasure, have the efforts to extirpate the Huguenots in France cost that kingdom? How often has it been brought thereby to the brink of ruin? As an instance of how careful Rome was to bind all secular princes to prosecute this war in the most unrelenting spirit, we may mention the decree of the Council of Toledo, which was the following effect. Quote, we, the Holy Council, promulgate this sentence pleasing to God, that whosoever hereafter shall succeed to the kingdom shall not mount the throne till he hath sworn to permit no man to live in his kingdom who is not a Catholic. And if after he hath taken the reins of government, he shall violate his promise, let him be anathema. Let him be anathema maranatha in the sight of the eternal God, and fuel for eternal fire, unquote. Numerous bulls of the popes, conceived in the same terms, enjoining the same duty, might be adduced. Who can tell what vast numbers of Christians have fallen sacrifice in this way? When at the last trumpet the mounds of this great battlefield, which is wide Europe, shall be opened, that numbers of slain shall rise up to condemn their common murderer. Calculations have been formed of the numbers of whom the papacy has slain. Oh boy, here we go. From the year 1540 to the year 1570, comprehending only the space of 30 years, no fewer than 900,000 Protestants were put to death by papists in the different countries of Europe. During the short pontificate of Paul IV, which lasted only 4 years, the Inquisition alone, on the testimony of Virgerius, destroyed 150,000. Those that perished in Germany during the wars of Charles V and in Flanders under the infamous Alva are counted by hundreds of thousands. For a number of years, especially after the Reformation, these countries swarmed with executioners and were covered with scaffolds and fires. In France, several millions were destroyed in the innumerable massacres that took place in that kingdom. It has been calculated that since the rise of the papacy, not fewer than 50 million persons have been put to death on account of religion. Okay, yeah, it's probably much, much greater than that, but we're not going to go into that right now because that's for further discussion. Of this inconceivable number, the greater part have been cut off during the last 600 years, for the papacy persecuted very little during the first half of its existence. It was not till the witnesses completed their testimony that it made war against them. 50 millions in the space of 600 years gives a rate of upwards of 80,000 every year. Let us think of 80,000 human beings destroyed year after year for the long period of 600 years, till at last the numbers swelled to the overwhelming amount of 50 million. What a fearful meaning does this give to the words of John? Quote, I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, and in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. Unquote. Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Wiley, because we should never really put a number on this. I mean, just look at World War II alone, how much, World War I and World War II, really, how much death and destruction surrounded that, and along with, the Spanish flu that's being talked about now so much after the World War I had finished. We won't go into that, but yeah, there we go. Now we're to the death of the witnesses. So yeah, very interesting how this book is bringing us up to our present day and age. And yeah, I mean, I really don't have to comment much because it's all just a matter of the cycle of life and this large cycle of history that keeps repeating itself, or seems to keep repeating itself. And how the kings of the earth have taken counsel against God's anointed, as it says in Psalms chapter 2. Nothing's changed other than our upbringing, our traditions, our so-called societies. Yeah, so that's where we're at. I'm going to leave it here for now, and we'll continue with the death of the witnesses next time. God bless, and bye-bye for now.